How's it going, everyone? This is Tom over at RedmanPie.com. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the Moto G has just been released by Motorola and Google. This is their budget smartphone. It actually costs $179 for the 8GB version off contract. We're going to be doing a quick comparison versus the Samsung Galaxy S4. Obviously, you're not going to be buying either of these smartphones and kind of legitimately comparing them against each other, but this is just a rough kind of benchmark to see how good the performance on the Moto G actually is. First off, a little boot test. Obviously not the most scientific of tests for overall performance, but it was just an interesting thing to see. So they were both powered on, or at least the power buttons were both pressed at exactly the same time. And the Moto X, or excuse me, the Moto G was actually first to respond, or at least the first to kind of the screen to light up. And the Samsung Galaxy S4 is taking a little bit longer, and the Moto G is actually first to boot up. However, that could well be due to some of the bloatware that's on the Samsung Galaxy S4, whereas you're getting a much more stock version of Android on the Moto G. The display is also definitely worth mentioning. The Moto G comes in with a resolution of 720 by 1280. That gives it a pixel density of 329 pixels per inch, whereas the Samsung Galaxy S4's a 1920 by 1080 panel, full 1080p with a pixel density of 441 pixels per inch. The S4's display is absolutely gorgeous. I don't think anyone's contesting that it's far better than the Moto G, but the Moto G actually comes on par with the Apple Retina displays. So again, for a smartphone of this price, it really is fantastic. As you'd expect, in terms of Geekbench performance, it is pretty one-sided in favour of the Galaxy S4, a single-core performance of 688 and a multi-core performance of 1838. On the Moto G's side, a single-core performance of 343 and then a multi-core performance of 1165. But again, these are still very respectable scores, and just through general operating system usage, you barely experience any lag with the Moto G, which is again incredibly impressive for its price point. Now onto a bit of web performance. Here we're loading RedmanPie.com on both devices, and as you can see, the Samsung Galaxy S4 on the left kind of loaded the page first, so you're able to interact with it. However, there were elements which actually are loaded faster on the right on the Moto G, as you can see here, and then the page fully loads on the S4 slightly after. Next up, Reddit.com. Let's go ahead and press go on there both at the same time. And you will see that pretty much both simultaneous on that one, both very, very similar, which of course is very impressive for the Moto G. And then finally on this one, we'll go ahead and load Samsung.com, and it should redirect us to the mobile site. And this is interesting because you get different components loading at different times. So initially you don't get very much loading, and then in a second you'll see the main body content load on the S4 and then on the Moto G, so again a slight advantage to the S4 there. Finally, we'll finish up with some gaming. Of course, the S4, I'm sure you don't really need a comparison of this. However, I will just throw in a bit of footage at the end if you'd like to see how the S4 performs on Riptide GP2. This is quite an intensive 3D rendering game. As you can see, the Moto G pretty much tears through it, actually. I'm very surprised, or very impressed is probably a better way to put it. You very rarely get drop frames, pretty much zero lag to behold, and it maintains pretty high frame rates, so very impressed with the Moto G in terms of performance and usability so far. And then here is the S4, if you're curious about how this performs. You get higher frame rates, it definitely feels a little bit more fluid than it does on the Moto G, but of course there's absolutely tears through the game with no issues whatsoever. There we have it, guys. That pretty much wraps up this comparison, or more of a showcase than a comparison, because obviously we're not totally comparing these two devices. You're not going to be choosing one or the other, I wouldn't imagine, but it may well have given you an idea about just how good the performance is on the Moto G, that of course has just been released for a very, very good price. If you have enjoyed this video, definitely be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. Subscribe here to RedmanPie TV if you don't want to miss any videos just like this one, and we'll catch you next time.